Welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W. I am an Episcopal priest living here in Austin, Texas. Had the gift of recovery for the last 50 years, and I'm working on the next 50, and hoping we go as long as we can go. Anyway, the idea behind these podcasts is taking folks a little deeper into the history, the spirituality, and the psychology that underlie the 12-step program. 12-step program saved my life, and I'm kind of into the giving back phase, trying to help people get to the essence of what the recovery journey is really about. And it's not just about going to meetings, and it's not just being subservient to your sponsor. It's about growing up and being responsible and taking a really deep spiritual journey. Some of the holiest and most whole people I've met have been in 12-step recovery, and but they're in a minority. I got to tell you that. They are a minority, but they've found what this journey has to offer. So that's what we're trying to do here. And I try to get people who've done the deal and taken the journey. And I got a live one that we're finishing up here. His name is Dr. James Ryan. He's written a book called Recovery Writing. And if you are watching or listening to this thing on YouTube, which we can now do, you can see the cover of the book. Go ahead and get a copy of the book. Helps him pay the rent. And this is a good thing. We don't want James being homeless again. So he's... We want to keep him going. This is the final episode that we're doing, so it's kind of a wrap up. It's been a fun time that I've had with you, James. And I was reflecting on writing because I've never really thought about it that much. Mm-hmm. I write. I did that in first grade, and learned it, all that stuff. I write, but what the hell is writing all about when it comes to recovery? And that's what your book is trying to get to. What's going on there? Yeah. And I was reflecting on this a little bit this week, and what I kind of came up with is that when I write or paint or dance or do creative activities, I'm getting in touch with a part of myself that is separate from my normal ego consciousness.
Sure, yeah.
I'm allowing something to come up. Mm-hmm. All right? And that's what's really, really important about this whole process, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of the practices that I've done and that I've learned about by talking to other people, they all have that element to them. Mm-hmm. In the book, I talk about it as discovery, but it really is that experience that you're talking about where I sit down to make something, or, I haven't looked at dance, but I'm sure it's very similar.
I haven't either. I just threw that one in there.
I like that. No, I really like that. I'm sure. That does take us into the realm of...
well, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for me. Dance would be very uncomfortable for me.
Me too.
Most of these, and there almost has to be an element of discomfort to it, doesn't there? I mean, not discomfort, different. Mm-hmm. You're not in control.
Right. I'm definitely not in control when I dance.
All right.
You and me are the same that way. And there's something about for me, the embarrassment or the awkwardness that I would have to confront. And then if I did, then whatever movement or expression came out of that would be something new for me, right?
And you got to own it. It's you. It came out of you.
That's right.
So it is a part of you.
Yeah. And the same thing happens on the page. The same thing happens on the page, right?
Exactly.
When we're writing. If we allow ourselves to open up to something else, something beyond the ego, like you say, then something will show up on the page that we didn't expect.
Right.
And in that exchange, there's the opportunity for finding out new things about ourselves, to release things that we've always kind of known about ourselves, mm-hmm. To confront those things, to own those things, and then to share those things, to tell other people about them. and become more whole in the process.
Yeah, wholeness is I'm so enamored with that it ain't about holiness, it's about wholeness.
Mm.
And they're very different. They're very different. I opt for the latter.
Right.
So what we're gonna do in this episode is kind of turn you loose on some exercises for folks and walk us through them. I think you've selected 3 from two are from the book. I know maybe one is not, but
That's
you
right.
just walk us through them, introduce them to us, and tell us what you maybe want us to do and get to gain from them.
Sure. Yeah. So the process of researching this book was, a process of talking to people like you in recovery who are doing interesting writing stuff and learning about the kinds of things you do, the experiences you're having, how it affects you, and then getting into the nitty gritty of how it's done. Right. So the book is sort of full of different things like that, different exercises, different interviews, experiences with people. And then to the extent that I can, is a how-to section about here's how to actually do this thing, right? And it's a real grab bag of different stuff in writing recovery exercises. So a few that I think are interesting that we haven't already discussed on the podcast. One is a thing called conduct inventory. And conduct inventory is something that grew out of Big Book sex inventory. In the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, when it describes how to write a 4-step inventory, talks about doing resentment inventory, talks about doing a fear inventory, then it talks about doing a sex inventory. It has a set of questions there and a few disclaimers and some sort of a sensibility about sexuality as an important thing to look at. We talked a little bit about that last time, I think. So there was a set of women that I talked to who found, and this is not exclusive phenomenon for women, but they discovered that when they got sober from their primary addiction, they stopped drinking or they stopped using drugs, a secondary addiction came up. So when they stopped drinking, they found that their disordered eating reared its ugly head, right? And they were out of control in their relationship with food. Or they stopped using drugs, but then the way that they were with money kind of went off the rails, right? So there's some other dynamic showed up to take the place of the other addiction, or it was a kind of dynamic that was there and was just hiding under the primary addiction, right? Mm-hmm. They struggled with this for a lot of these folks. It caused relapse into the primary addiction. So
it's pretty common.
Right. I get clean and sober, and then I'm out of control with food. That drives me nuts. So I'm back to the drinking and drugs.
Give me something.
Yeah. Right.
I was going to do a 5th step with a guy, and we were at a treatment center. I was chaplain there. I hope they've recovered from that by now. But anyway, we're getting coffees, to go off to the room. And I swear to God, he put 30 little packets of sugar into. I'm watching them, at 10. Okay, I'm watching 20, 30. I said, "Hey, Frank, what the hell are you doing here?" He said, "Jesus, I gotta have something."
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
Yeah. Next week is 31.
Yeah. And they kind of do the packets like they're doing heroin.
Right. Well, you don't want to miss any of the granules of sugar. You got to get them all in the cup.
Right. Yeah. Flick that little finger. Get it going. Okay. I'm sorry.
That's the real stuff. No. That's the dynamic, right? That's the dynamic. And so I guess the question would be, well, why sex inventory for all these different kinds of behaviors that are out of control? And the reason is that they sort of grabbed onto this notion that sex inventory could be more broadly understood as a relationship inventory. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's not just about sexual acts. It's about the way that you relate to other human beings in an intimate way. But even beyond that, it can be used to examine any kind of relationship that you have. So it can be your relationship to food, or it can be a relationship to money, or it can be a relationship to sex, of course, other people. But any number of substances or behaviors, you can look at your relationship and kind of study it through a similar set of questions. And they started to do that. They started to do that with their secondary addictions, or however you want to call that secondary phenomenon, their disordered eating and their out of control spending and their relationship problems. And they found that this was really effective in the sense that it allowed them to maintain their sobriety, their primary sobriety, and allowed them to have longer periods of abstinence from the secondary out of control thing, right? Being able to like look at this thing, put it on the page, gain some insight into it, have that encounter, that discovery encounter, that creative kind of revealing moment of what's at the core of this thing, and encounter that.
It lessens the intensity.
Yeah.
Of the drive. It makes it conscious. It's unconscious,
right.
And it needs to become conscious.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
So, and that by doing that, they were able to maintain sanity, stability, sobriety in ways that they could never do before. Right. And as a result, I mean, one of the interesting things about that chapter in the book is that this whole community of women grows kind of around this practice. In that one of the really core important parts of recovery writing is not just doing the writing, it's doing the sharing of the writing, right? And doing the teaching the writing to other people. It's hard, if you don't say it out loud, then there's something missing from the practice, right? And if you don't share the healing with somebody else, then there's something missing from the practice. To make it a complete recovery writing experience, it goes from my discovery experience to my connection with something else, to my action in the world, and that action is both saying it to somebody and then sharing, helping somebody else get the same healing, right?
I'm with you.
So the conduct inventory becomes this place where primarily women, but not just women, have this experience of self-examination around secondary addictions and healing around them, and it creates kind of a new fellowship, a new meeting develops and stuff like that. To your point of, I just want to look up the directions here. In the book, I have two different, I don't know if you're on YouTube, maybe, a couple different layouts for how they do this inventory. Mm-hmm. There's not a fixed single way to do it. A couple different folks told me a couple different ways. To make it conscious was your comment, right? To make something conscious.
Yes.
Which means that in behavior like this, in our addictions, in our secondary addictions, in our out of control behavior, there's some core or kernel to it that's kind of the driving force, which we're not really aware of when we're captured by the behavior, right?
Yes.
And questions like the ones in this inventory are meant to sort of bring that to awareness and transform it, to contact some other power that can help us through that thing once we're aware of it, right?
Right.
So the questions kind of began the way that like big booky inventory questions began. It's like, what's the problem? How have we been selfish and inconsiderate? Who got hurt? Where have I caused suspicion and bitterness? That's all very big book sex inventory questions, right? So what's the problem here, and how has it caused chaos in my life? And then there's a couple questions that I think in this format, I think are really powerful. The first one is, what is this really about? What is this really about? So here's all the chaos I've caused. But what's underneath that? What's the driving motivator? What am I trying to accomplish with this, right?
And you'd better pause at that one.
Yeah.
Because you may well not know.
I think you have to assume that you don't.
I didn't want to be that bold, but you take it, buddy.
I really think you do. I think you're right on the money. And yeah. if you go in thinking that you can figure it out, right, you're going to miss the mark.
That's right.
So a question like that is a powerful one, and it's one that requires, to do it well, to do it right, you really have to stop and do that opening up and become vulnerable and sink into that discovery space.
Yeah, you tell me.
Yeah.
Because these are forces.
Yeah.
That have control of me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have control of them.
Right.
They have control of me.
That's right. And that's demonstrated by the first things you wrote. What am I doing? Here's all the problems it's causing, right?
Right.
You're demonstrating that not being in control.
Right.
So yeah, it better tell us, right?
I don't have any trouble with broccoli. I'm not going to Broccoli Anonymous. I'm not writing about my broccoli encounters.
Yeah,
I don't go there.
Mm-hmm.
But other stuff.
Their stuff has power. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
So what is it really about? Right. And it has to be sort of a prayerful or a dialogue, kind of an exchange, right?
Right. That's right.
I'm opening myself to be vulnerable and to hear something new. And that could be a dialogue. That could be like, what we've been talking about, active imagination.
Right.
That could be asking the behavior what it's really about, asking it to tell you.
Why are you there?
What are you doing, dude?
What you doing in me, buddy?
That's right. Or it can be, in a kind of a dialogue with a higher power. Please show me what's going on here, right?
Right. That's right.
And the last question of this particular format is then, how can I become God reliant? In other words, how do I've been trying to control this thing. I've been trying to control my life. I've been trying to control the whatever it is in that what's really going on column, right?
Right.
And so how do I connect with higher power in the what's really going on area, right?
Because something's out of whack there.
Yeah, right. And none of us know what it is until we start writing. And I don't think it's going to be the same thing for two people who do the same exercise. Two people out of control in their disordered eating area of their life, acting out in similar ways, will get to what's this really about? And I think that they'll have different answers.
Right. And they can deepen over time. You may be ready for one.
That's right.
And several years later, ready for another.
Yeah, that's good. Right.
But you got to start.
You got to start, and you got to listen. You got to pay attention, and you got to put it on the page, right?
Right. Right.
So that's conduct inventory.
Conduct inventory. Okay.
Yeah. It's a way of looking at really any kind of behavior or relationship that becomes problematic, whether it's a full-blown addiction or whether it's kind of a secondary problematic thing that's happening. Something's going on in a relationship with a person or a substance or a behavior. You can bring light to that, right?
Right.
Second exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Ready to move on?
Yes, I like this one. This one is.
This is good.
This is going to open up a lot of doors.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So this is a resilient heart, and this comes to us from Margaret Bullitt Jonas, who some people may be familiar with her. She wrote a memoir called Holy Hunger, which is about her experience of food addiction.
Yeah.
And she is an Episcopal priest too. And her, I don't know what you call it, her appointment or her job is to work full-time on climate justice issues. So she's very much engaged in the process of bringing awareness to and doing social action around and conducting workshops about the changing climate and the policies that need to change in order to, not roast everybody alive on the planet. So really important work and really difficult work. You're up against, when you're doing that kind of work, you're up against kind of everything. You're up against the oil companies and the way that government works and all kinds of things that are impediments to the kind of large scale systemic change that needs to happen in order to not degrade the climate any further. So important, but also painful work to be into, right? That kind of activism can lead people to be really burned out quite easily. You can get angry and you get burned out in anger.
Right.
You can get hopeless and you can kind of just give up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can get really cynical.
So far, I've been to all of those places, James.
This is sounding familiar. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I know the territory.
So she does these workshops that sound incredibly powerful for climate activists specifically, but I think this would be something valuable to anybody engaged in the work of trying to make the world a better place, which I think we're all called to do. If you're in recovery and you get to step 12, your job, I would argue, is to make the world a better place than you found it.
Which is the basic premise that the Oxford group started off on, isn't it?
Oh, for sure.
Change the world.
That's right.
But you can't change the world without changing yourself.
Right.
And I tried. I mean, I was an idealist, utopian. I would go off on all of these things to change the world, but I kept right on drinking.
Right.
Hell, that's the only way I'm going to change this world.
That's
Too
right.
much work.
That's right.
Jesus.
You need to, you need the
Yeah.
buffer. And then when the world's fine, then you won't need to drink anymore.
That's right. That's right.
This
kind of
is,
slowed me down for about 20 years. I got to tell you, it's like
yeah.
work on yourself. Let the world go for a while.
Right. Right.
But at some point,
I think
you got to pick it up again.
You do have to pick it up again. And I think step 12 is the right place. I don't think it's the kind of thing, I could be wrong. There's people who get into activism right away in their recoveries, and that's great. Right. For some of us, it's like, I need to get my life together, my brain together, go through the earlier steps. And then I'm in this kind of like, well, now how do I live? I'm sober now. I've had this spiritual awakening. I'm connected. I'm a new person. How am I supposed to live? And one of those ways I think you're supposed to live is you help other people. You make the world better.
What is the world asking of me?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And there are some big problems that it would be good to address, like climate change, like many things.
Right. But don't bring that up at a meeting, or they'll stone you.
Well, sure, because this brings us into politics, right?
And singleness of purpose.
And you're right. That's right. So there's not the AA meeting room or the NA meeting room is not the appropriate place probably to do this, or it's not. Those fellowships are not well built to handle.
They're not intended to be.
No. Right. That's right.
It's not their purpose.
Right.
But you have to find your purpose.
Yeah.
That's the deeper thing.
Right.
So we got 3 stages here. I think they're stages. The awakened heart.
Yep. Awakened heart, broken heart, radiant heart is the 3.
Awakened heart, broken heart, radiant heart.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awakened
take us through.
Now, Margaret would be much better at explaining these. So I'm going to give you my best shot at them. If you want to look her up, she's at revivingcreation.org. You can kind of get more insight and contact her about this stuff. Okay. But awakened heart is sort of, I think, what we go through in recovery. We wake up. Yeah. We have a spiritual connection, a spiritual awakening, right?
Rip Van Winkle. Where the hell have I been for 20 years?
Right. We come alive.
Yep.
And in coming alive, we connect to the world in a new way that we haven't ever done before, right?
Scary as hell.
Scary as hell, but beautiful.
Yep.
There's something to really appreciate. So, for example, early in this is just a weird little story about me, and I'm like 3 months sober, or 3 months after doing my 5th step with my sponsor, telling him everything about me. I have this kind of clarifying experience. A few months later, I wake up at 6 a.m. I'm a guy who normally sleeps until noon at that point, right? Not anymore, but up to that point, I was a late sleeper. I wake up at 6 a.m. I put my boots on and I go out the door. It's not my normal behavior at all. And I'm living in a small town in Maine, Western Maine. I walk up a hill, I climb a tree, all weird behaviors for me. And the sun is just rising.
Sounds like your inner monkey was coming out, huh?
Weird. I just was following these impulses. And I'm up in this tree in the woods in Maine. And there's the sun breaks over the canopy. And there's 50 different species of birds hopping around and singing, right? Just full of life, full of song, full of beauty. And it's something in me was dude, you need to see how beautiful this world is, right?
Wow.
Yeah. You need to know this, that this is a good.
Your inner St. Francis is coming out too, hey?
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you talking to the birds?
No, I was just kind of blown away, right? I was just sort of, holy crap, look at this. Okay. They're darting around and jumping around and colorful feathers and beautiful song.
Yeah.
And it changed something in me. I don't know. I probably, if I wanted to go the St. Francis route, I should have done that every day. And then I could have had the flock, right?
Half measures availed us something.
That's true. That's true. That's an example of an awakening experience, right? That's the awakened heart is one that connects to the world, that listens to the world, that is
a cloud goes by and you notice it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right.
It's stopping and feeling presence that you've maybe never felt before.
Hmm.
Tremendous power in it.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
okay, beautiful. Yeah, awakened heart.
So her writing questions in that area are sort of around the question of, how are we connected to the world and its beauty? What
Mm-hmm.
sort of things block us from that kind of awareness? And then meditating on the importance of that connection to our lives, right? And it really is a kind of centering our spirituality on that kind of connection to the natural world, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In a way that I think is really important, and specifically for climate activism, that's like a core piece. If you're going to maintain your investment and motivation to do that kind of activism, it should come from a place
Right, right.
of that value, right?
Yeah, because in my thinking, I
Yeah,
am separate from the world. I
yeah,
want to control the world.
right.
The world answers to me. I go through it and I'm missing it.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah. That
Okay.
frame of mind, right, is exactly, I mean, some people would argue that frame of mind is sort of the problem, and that climate change is just the consequence of a lot of people viewing the world that way, right? The knock-on effects are, I can do whatever I want with the world, and then you get into a disaster, right?
It's egotism, once again, is at the root of
Yeah,
the world's problems.
right.
Yeah,
It's not unlike addiction, and it may even be fair to call it a collective addiction, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
So you got to wake up to this.
Mm-hmm.
There's a waking up that certainly happens with the addict who's in recovery. There was some element, time, maybe place where there was an awakening
Yep.
and which led to action.
Yeah.
But it's really just the first of many. And this is not so much related to addiction
Mm.
as to my place in the world.
Right.
Waking up to that.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Mhm.
right.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the awakened heart.
Okay.
Then we have broken heart.
Broken
And
heart.
broken heart, and again, of course, Margaret would be better explaining all this. But my understanding of it is that once we are awakened to and connected to the world and vulnerable to it, it breaks our hearts.
Yeah, it's painful.
It's painful because the world, you look around and it's not in great shape, right?
No.
Right. Which again is a motivating force in climate activism, right? Is that, things are going really, really wrong. There's lots of big problems happening, and it's heartbreaking. It's painful to know that people are suffering, that the world is suffering, that we're losing so much daily, and that the consequences are very dire if change doesn't happen. To really be aware and attentive to that is an ongoing source of suffering, right? It can be very painful.
Ram Dass used to talk about compassion fatigue.
Yep, sure.
It's like,
Yeah.
oh, the whales. I mean, you watch this on, TV.
Hmm.
Here come the kids with this, the people with that.
Yeah.
At some point, I mean, this is a very painful place, this
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
And I want to shut down to that.
Right. Yeah.
Or
Compassion
get
fatigue.
changed by it. Maybe there's another option.
I mean, there is, and I think that comes in with the radiant heart. But we don't want to bypass the broken heart,
Let's stay there for a while. Go ahead, talk more.
because it's important when the world is breaking your heart to acknowledge that and to grieve what you need to grieve,
Okay,
and
right.
and to
That's right.
and to be present to the pain that's there, right?
Yeah,
And this is
it's
this is just true in life. Things are going to happen. You're going to lose people that you love. You're
hmm
going to have to show up at the emergency room for somebody, and they may not make it, and you can't do anything about it. And you just need to, your job is to be there and hurt, right?
Yeah.
You have people going through, all kinds of episodes and suffering in their life and in ways that you can't fix. And I mean, you should know this as a sponsor, right? If you're sponsoring people in 12-step recovery, You have the power of your story and your insight, but there's a limit to what you can do to really, you can't fix other people, right? And so you're showing up with a heart that breaks over and over again for people who are suffering, and your job is to be that vulnerable and to hurt, right? My grand sponsor had this, or great grand sponsor, had this saying. He would tell you when you came into recovery, he'd say, well, stick around and we'll show you how to hurt.
Yeah.
Which doesn't sound like, and he would laugh, right? It doesn't sound like a great promise, but it really is, because I don't know how to hurt. Right?
And I had encouragement from my sponsor who said, well, Bill, you're hurting in all the right areas.
That's good.
They're kind of similar.
Yeah.
Kind of similar. Yeah.
So the questions that Margaret is asking in this sort of reflect.
Because again, to go back to addiction.
Go ahead.
In addiction, you want to short circuit that.
Exactly. Yeah.
You want to eat instead of hurt.
Yeah, that's right. Even for a second.
Even for a second.
Yeah, right. I don't want to be alone.
I noticed about eating addictions. I kind of studied this a little bit.
Okay.
Nobody eats hard things. It's soft and mushy. It's mother's milk.
Okay.
You see, it's ice cream. It's mashed potatoes. It's give me that comfort that I'm not feeling right now. I want to get lost in that.
Yeah.
For a minute.
Right. Yeah. And that's not different from how I want to feel when I get high, or how people feel when they want to drink, or how people, right? We want that comfort instead of the pain of showing up and being vulnerable.
Right.
So staying with the broken heart, staying with the pain, paying attention to it. And in this case, writing reflectively about those parts of you that are hurting in this way, right?
Right.
Name them, talk to them, investigate them, share them with other people.
Let me inject something here, because when I always tell people, you don't have to share this with anybody.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, when you're writing it, you're not gonna share it with anybody.
Mentally, that's the place where you're at. Yeah.
That's the safety place.
Yeah. That's right.
Now, after that, that's another stage, another phase. I think you're right in that sharing it is really helpful, and it is the natural conclusion, but it doesn't have to be.
That's true. That's a really fair point to make, right?
Yeah. Get it down on paper.
Yeah.
Get it out of you. Get it where you can look at it and not have it dominating you. And then get your guidance and see where you go with that, because there is great benefit to sharing.
Yeah, right.
But there's also tremendous fear in having to.
Right. And sometimes if you feel like you have to, you might not even go there in the first place. Right.
Or you'll shade it. You might shade it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so the mentality of I don't have to share this and I'm not gonna can get you through the writing part. And it really is true that, you're a free person. And if you decide I'm not ready to share this yet.
That's right.
Then that's a totally valid choice.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I'm betting on the Buddhists, and in life number 483, I might be ready.
It's anybody who's in that kind of middle space, I would say, bless you and whatever you need to do. And there's an incredible power in sharing something that we think is so unique to us, and then finding out that pain is shared by another human who doesn't judge us. Right?
That's right. And this is also, James, the place of tears, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. And there's just nothing like it.
Yeah.
A good cry.
Yeah, sure.
Because it is sad. It's tremendously sad, some of the stuff we're dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Feel it.
Right. Instead of and don't turn away from the pain, because turning away from the pain is what makes you go back to being numb.
Right.
And it takes away from your being awakened again. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
It's the reason you don't want to connect anymore.
Back to sleep. I want to go back to sleep.
So we got to go through the pain. We got to let our hearts break. But then what?
Yeah.
Right. And so this is where she comes in and says, radiant heart. Okay. And radiant heart is the person or the state of being, right? Where we're both awakened and brokenhearted, and like sitting with that and taking action in the world anyway, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not an easy place to be, but it is a real place to be, right? And I think it is the place that defines real solid sponsorship and 12-step work. And it's the place that defines a sustainable practice of activism in order to change the world to do better stuff. It has to come from an acknowledgement of the value and beauty that you're fighting for, and the brokenness and the pain that you experience around everything that's happening in this world.
Right.
And then it has to say, and in light of both of those things, and with the love and the hurt, I'm going to move forward, and I'm going to do this one thing, this simple thing, to try to address and try to improve the world. Right.
And if and when you're able to do that,
yeah,
something comes through you, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, in my limited experience, I found that that's true.
Other than the ego.
Yeah,
it's not the ego. It's an experience of the divine within, the great reality within, the beyond within. Call it what you want.
Mm-hmm.
But you're then in sync with it.
Right.
And you're crying.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're inviting people in.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to go in.
Right.
Because there's a purity to it. There's a cleansing to it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reality to it that the world is just, it's full of crap. There's so much crap around. And now you're seeing honesty.
Mm-hmm.
And you're touched by it.
Right. Right.
It's a beautiful thing.
Right. It is a beautiful thing. There's a real power in being able to be in that place. And
yes.
it is attractive in the sense of, like, people do want to be there. I do. I want to be in the place where it's all real and true and authentic. Right.
Right.
I want that.
Right. Yeah.
I want to be able to confront the pain in the world and not be destroyed by it and run back into my little cave. Right. I want to be able to do that.
And at the same time, I don't want that.
Oh no, that's right.
So there's the split. You know.
You're right.
There's the split we started off talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's writing or life, but something has to break through, and when it does, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah. I do want to read one question from the Radiant Heart self-examination. Mm-hmm. This is the last question in this series of questions that she asks.
Okay.
And I think it's actually a question that scares me. Okay.
Good.
It says, if you knew you could not fail, if you were set free from all fear, what would you do for the healing of our world?
Mm-hmm.
If you knew you could not fail, if you were set free from all fear, what would you do for the healing of our world? And that's not a question that says, make a to-do list.
Right.
That might generate that, but it might not. It just says, imagine yourself in the place where you're beyond your fear.
And free enough to follow it.
And free, yeah, right.
To follow your bliss, to follow your heart, your broken heart.
Awakened, radiant heart, right?
Yeah.
And broken. If you were able to follow that without limiting yourself, and you knew you weren't going to fail, what would you do?
What would you do?
Yeah. I think those two conditions are really important.
I do too.
Because I'm always afraid to take action, all kinds of stuff. And the sense of, like, well, what's the point anyway? I'm just going to fail. It's not going to work. Nothing's going to, like, that sort of negative banter in my head will prevent me from doing a lot of things. So this question says, set that aside. Set aside the fear. Imagine yourself past both of those things.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
what are you doing for the healing of our world? And
there were two, I'm going to tell a little story here. When I was in the Jesuits, and I'm an alcoholic. I had no business being there, but I was there. And I looked around and I was awake enough to notice people who had it. And this is 50 some odd years ago, but there were two guys who stood out in my mind. And when you're talking about this, the thought that came back to me. One was a guy who, the Jesuits are pretty smart, they go get their advanced degrees and go to Harvard and Yale and all this sort of stuff. And this one guy, he said, they said, where do you want to go? And he went to Barnum and Bailey Clown School.
Wow, okay, awesome.
And he became a clown.
Wow, yeah.
And he became an itinerant clown. So he would never stay anywhere longer than a week or two and then move on and tell stories and juggle. And that was his ministry.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah. That's a wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
You wouldn't expect that.
And they didn't like that. The other guy went to Cambodia. This is the humblest guy I ever knew. His name was Bob Matt, M-A-A-T.
Yeah.
He gave me his Bible. I still have it. But he's the closest I've ever come to a saint. And he went over to Cambodia with the monks and he sat. He answered that question that you're asking. He answered it.
Right.
And he went.
Right.
And they kicked him out, I think. It's like you can't, the machine can't stomach oftentimes if you go and do what life is calling you to do. Be prepared for people not to accept it.
Right.
And in addition to yourself not wanting to accept it.
Right.
But hats off to those who do it.
This is why it's such a scary question.
Damn right it is.
It's like, what if I sit down with this thing and it tells me you should go to clown school?
Right.
Uh-oh.
That's right.
Uh-oh.
That's right.
Or I'm supposed to fly to Cambodia or whatever it is. Like,
that's right.
There's a lot of power in the question when there's layers of resignation to the state of the world. And there's layers of fear about what people will think that I'm not even aware of inside me, right? And if I really let those unroll, who knows what could come up? This is our reoccurring theme in this podcast, right? Is who knows what might come up. And the power and of course the fear around that is real, but also the beauty of being a clown.
That's right.
Yeah. Right.
And it goes by, find your voice.
Yeah.
Find your true self.
Mm-hmm.
If this isn't the ultimate aim of recovery, or as you say, discovery.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're still playing a game.
Right.
Now the game can go on for years. I mean, it's not. I don't know that on day 2 in detox, you're going to set off to be a missionary. Probably not a good idea.
No, if you think you would need to, then you should talk to somebody first.
You might want to check that one out. Or if I'm married and I've got 4 kids and God's calling me to do this, that, look again.
Right.
Find it where you are.
Yeah. Right.
Find it where you are. And if you've really found it where you are, then you're going to go where you need to go. But it's not going to be by going there, I'm going to find it. No.
Sure.
That's the trap. That's the trap.
If I just get away from all this stuff, then I'll just get right. No.
If I can't handle it here, I'm not going to handle it there.
Sure. No, it's right here in my circumstances. What's the thing that needs to be done?
That's right. Yeah. Very beautiful. You got Audre Lorde.
Sure. Yeah. So this is something I'm working on now. So obviously the book exists, recovery writing, but the work of finding new writing exercises is not done. I'm keeping track. Every month I try to research and write a little bit about a new one, new to me writing exercise.
Sure.
I have got a little blog going called, let's see, where would you find this? If you go to recoverywriting.org and you click on newsletter, it'll take you through. Otherwise, it's recoverywriting.substack.com. And every month
you send that to me and I'll put it in the show notes.
Okay, yeah, we'll put the link in the show notes. And it's, every month there's a new post that says, like, here's this kind of writing that people are doing for their recovery. Here's how it works. And here's a sort of how to do it, right? Probably the next one that's going up is just like hey, listen to this podcast. So if you're already listening to the podcast, the new post is not going to be very interesting, but previous ones might be. The one I'm working on right now is sort of related to the resilient heart exercise that we talked about. And it's a kind of inventory that comes not from recovery, but I think could be useful to people in recovery, especially those of us who are interested in this, how do I make the world a better place stuff, right? This comes from Audre Lorde, who identifies as a Black lesbian feminist poet. It comes from her book, The Cancer Journals. She gets breast cancer, and she writes a series of essays about the experience of that. So when you have a pretty heavy diagnosis like that, obviously there's a deep spiritual confrontation that happens, which is the confrontation of you with your own mortality, right? I might die soon, right? They just told me I have cancer. This is real. This could happen right now. If this one doesn't get me, something's going to get me, right? And it's really present to you all of a sudden in a way that it's not usually in your normal life, because that's another thing that we try to hide from and push down, right? So she's going through that. She's also confronting the layers of misogyny and racism that are built up in the healthcare system. And so in combination with her spiritual process of confronting her mortality, she's also encountering ways in which well-meaning people in the medical establishment are trying to prevent her from or soften the blow, I guess, of that confrontation with mortality, right?
Oh yeah.
And so she's really great at sort of critiquing, like observing and then offering her critique of that whole process. And along the way, she asks a couple of questions that are quite powerful, okay? For anybody kind of in a mode to sort of, and these are questions that sort of place our spiritual experiences, which are not always pleasant, sometimes they're confrontations with death, place our spiritual experiences in the kind of social context, okay? And for her, what she comes out of the experience with is this notion that I only have so much time. My job is to say what I have to say. My job is she's a writer, she's a poet, so that's already kind of her job, but even more so, right? There's things that she's holding back. She can't do that anymore, right? There's a limited time.
It's now or never.
It's now or never. Got to be said, right?
Right.
Got to let these things out. So she asked these questions. This is on, if you have the book, it's on page 14. She says, what are the words you do not yet have? What do you need to say? So this is kind of like going into territory that we've already kind of covered to some extent, right? There's things inside me that need to be said. I don't even know what they are. I'm not sure I have the language for them yet, but I know I need to say something. So she's saying, what is that? Get that up, get that out, right? Another question she asked is, what are the tyrannies you swallow day by day? An attempt to make your own until you will sicken and die of them still in silence. That's a heavy question, right?
It is, yeah.
What are the tyrannies you swallow day by day? So this is like, she's a Black lesbian feminist poet. She's not unfamiliar with oppression and suffering. And she's saying, what are those forces that are pushing on your life, right? And that you attempt to make your own. I think what she means there, the people better qualified to tell you what she means there, but what I think she means there is we can internalize that stuff, right? The ways in which
we can let them define us.
yes, right. There you go. Right.
Okay.
And we come to think of ourselves that way, right?
Right.
And it becomes who we think we are.
Right.
Until you will sicken and die of them.
Yeah, and
right?
this is where the self-hatred comes up.
Right.
That if that's not a part of a fifth step,
mm-hmm.
I'm always leery of them, because I think it goes to core.
Right.
It's a big scab you don't want to take off.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a really,
but she didn't have time, so she's taking it off.
She's taking it off, ripping it off, and she's encouraging us to do the same thing. There's more questions there, and there's another poet who subsequently took those questions and sort of formalized it into a kind of a self-examination exercise. And there's some other folks who have taken other writings by her and have turned them into self-examination exercises.
Yeah. What I like about these questions are, I think the questions should be few.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But deep.
Right.
I hate seeing 50 or 100 questions. Right. It just drives me nuts.
Well, it'll take you forever for one thing, right?
And it leads you nowhere.
You might, if you have to get through them all, you're going to go bip, 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 right?
That's right.
And you want to sit with something like this, like the tyrannies that are sickening you, and you want to let it sink in.
Yeah, and it may take some time, That's why people ask, what should I ask in two-way prayer, And can I repeat it? Well, I hope so. I hope so, because you keep going back to it, because it's layer after layer after layer of waking up, of hurting, and then of going forward. What's your guidance? Where is God leading you? Where is life leading you?
Right.
And will you follow or will you not? And sometimes, no, I'm a coward. I'm not doing it. No Cambodia today.
Right. Well, one of the helpful things in talking with you over these podcasts to me has been that we're sort of muddling our way forward, right?
That's right.
That it's not just a yes or no, now or never, do or die, you got it or you don't. It's like you're always being called. There's always a thing to do. You're not going to do all of them.
No.
You're going to screw some of those up, but you're going to keep showing up to it anyway, right?
That Muddlers Anonymous.
Yeah.
That's, well, you and I are charter members. No, well, you've done your thing, and I've in my way, I've done mine. I mean, it's what is life calling you to do?
Mm-hmm.
What are the excuses you're making for not answering the call?
Yeah, right.
And then have you got the guts to go and do it?
Yeah.
Even if it's just dabbling.
Yeah.
Even if it's just getting your feet wet, up to your knees. But,
you got to. I think that's so important to do the first little thing, right?
That's right. That's uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, it's who you are.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, James, this has, it's been a delight.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, I've really had fun, and I'm sure the listeners have enjoyed it as well. You have a lot to say. Encourage people to pick up a copy of James's book, Recovery Writing. Even more important, I encourage you to pick up the pen and start writing yourself.
That's right.
You can read about it and never pick up the damn pen. John Bradshaw used to say, when people die and they go to heaven, they're going to see two doors, and one door will say heaven, and the other door will say a lecture about heaven. And most people will go to the lecture.
Oh, I can see the temptation. Yeah.
Okay. Again, really, really good. Thank you, James, for all your time and your work on this book. It was really, really helpful. And hope you guys have gained some stuff from that. Drop James a line if you did. Send us a line. We'll put both of those in the show notes. So, not sure what the next series is going to be, but I will go to my back porch and I will do my two-way prayer, and God will give me some guidance. So, whatever the hell it is, I'll see you there. Take care, James.
Take
Thanks,
care.
you guys. Bye bye.